easy, but you are here to serve a greater purpose. The fact that you can even stand up and speak out against injustice is not going to go over well with your enemies. In fact, they want to shut you down.
So then no matter what I say, they gonna say it's disrespectful. They only mad cause they see that you're successful. You could try helping them, but it be too stressful. They ain't even helping themselves, they're so neglectful. For 9 years I knew the flow was something special. I know you'd be proud of me if your pride would let you. Feel like a voice they ball with you. Let me correct you. It's the club. Catching on the pitch. Pay attention as you talking.
All right. Thank you. That was really great stuff. So that is a piece from one of our panelists, Cornell Lord Judah Carelock, and that was Discipline, available on YouTube. Thank you so much. And we wanted to use that to open up since he is part of our panel discussion this evening. Happy New Year to everyone and welcome, welcome. We are so glad to see you again. We have missed you. Welcome to this special edition of Race Talk Revolution, where your voice matters. I am Reverend Lane Cobb. I'm your host and founder of Race Talk Revolution. And I'm here today with my co-host, Mr. AJ Woodson, who is editor-in-chief of Black Westchester Magazine and co-host of People Before Politics Radio. This podcast installation is provided in partnership with Arts 10566 and made possible by a Community Arts Residency Award grant from the Pecanico Center of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Today's discussion is the third in a series of 4 panel discussions about the intersections between race, ethnicity, and the arts. The title for this evening's conversation is Culture, Not Costume, Appropriation of Expression in Art, Music, and Dance. For those who don't know, art appropriation is the use of pre-existing objects or images with little or no transformation applied to them. And unfortunately, this often causes controversy when representatives of the dominant culture use the cultural values and images of a minority group and violates intellectual property rights and illegally appropriates art forms. And this happens all the time. It has happened throughout history. And the lines between appropriation and misappropriation are easily blurred. So gracing us with their time and expertise this evening are 3 educators, activists, and artists whose bios I will read presently. The first part of our program is going to be interview format, and viewers are going to have the opportunity to ask questions either directly or in the chat. When that time comes, we will instruct you how to raise your hand, and until then, we ask that you please remain muted. Before we introduce our panel, I'd like to invite Jermaine Smith of Arts 10566 to say a few words about his organization and why this discussion about race and the arts is important. And then I'm going to ask AJ to say a little background on this topic. Jermaine, if you would. You're muted, brother.
Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you all being here. I'm actually co-founder of NU Builds, which is a community organization based out of Ossany, and we have a partnership with Arts 10566, and they are the grant holder and the fiscal sponsor for the work that we've been doing with the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and Pecanico. Arts 10566 was started in 2013 by 2 great friends, Wilfredo Morel and Lee Butler, to bring arts to the youth in Peekskill, the minority youth in Peekskill, and they've since expanded and been doing some amazing work with the school district and a lot of municipalities over the years. And this conversation is melds into the world of art and what they're doing there, as well as some of the community engagement and youth development work that we're doing throughout Westchester as part of the work that we're doing here. So I would want to get right into this conversation. We have about an hour and a half, and last time we ran out of time because we had some really in-depth, rich conversations happening. So I'll keep it short, but definitely feel free to email us if you have any questions. You can email me directly, jermaine@nubuilds.com. I will put it into the chat. And again, thank you all for joining this evening, and thank you, and we're honored to have our panelists here. And thank you again, Lane Cobb, for hosting.
Indeed, we're so happy to do this. We're honored. AJ, would you give us a little bit of background? How does art appropriation and misappropriation show up in popular culture?
Well, I can speak to how it shows up in the music business. I was a recording artist, a rapper in the late 80s. throughout the music business, there's always been misappropriation from record companies taking credit for their artists as writers and taking their royalties and their publishing. It even shows up, we look at it as an outside entity. It's also been an inside entity. There's been a lot of artists who have sent their demos to a label and find out that LL Cool J or somebody recorded the project was given to that one of the artists on the label when not knowing that artist doesn't know, but the label gave somebody else's prop. So it happens inside and outside. So I just wanted to bring that up.
It does indeed. I remember one of the first times that I remember learning about misappropriation of culture was when I was in my 20s, I guess, and there was a movie with Dudley Moore and Bo Derek, and she's running down the beach with her like braids, right, and her beads and stuff. And so the people in the media are talking about, oh, this new hairstyle that got originated on this movie set and all that. And people really had to pull the chain on that. They really had to give history of what that was so that people understood. But then you started seeing all the white women going on vacation and getting their hair braided. Like you never saw that before, right?
I guess the Bo Derek, yeah.
Right. So it's taking something, right? It's like getting your hair frizzy. It's like it's a lot of stuff, but also rap music in commercials and all over the place to sell all kinds of things. It's the background for life now, right? But who's getting paid? Are the composers, are the artists actually getting their due? It's like in the 60s with rock and roll and all of that, when the Black musical artists were writing the songs, but the white musical artists were playing it and getting paid. So it's much bigger than what we have represented here. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our panelists so they can talk more deeply about how it affects their work. Jillian McRae is a racial justice strategist and consultant and longtime public school teacher and instructional coach. Ms. McRae currently teaches at Ossining High School and has co-created and co-taught several college-level courses during her tenure there, including SUNY, Classism, Racism, Sexism, the Black Experience Through Literature and History, Concepts of Race and Culture in the Modern World, and Latinos in the U.S. She has also served as a co-coordinator for district equity work for the Ossining School District with a focus on culturally responsive and sustaining practices in secondary spaces. She has an undergraduate degree in English with a double minor in urban education and Africana studies from the University at Albany and a master's in English education from Teachers College. Ridvan Idara is an educator, parenting and life coach, therapist, artist, and team building strategist. Founder and executive director of New Era Creative Space, she educates and empowers families to live to their highest potential and guides institutions and teams looking to create a culture of peace and inclusivity. Ms. Idara has over 20 years of experience advancing education, the arts, and racial healing. Committed to inspiring stronger communities through creative programs, her nonprofit organization employs a uniquely positive approach to community organizing, staff development, and conflict resolution, offering year-long creative and innovative programs for children and youth with an emphasis on social action. Cornell Lord Judah Carelock is a teaching artist who seeks to create a lively exchange of ideas among many different communities. Lord Judah has over 10 years of K-12 mental health and adult age experience through music and has done hands-on training for years in the music industry. Among other projects, he teaches a hip-hop workshop that focuses on the 9 elements of hip-hop, and all are well-informed about his history by the end of the workshop. Since 2015, Lord Judah has developed residencies based on career pathways in the fields of audio and video production and digital technology. His True Heart Academy is an adult-focused initiative based on healing through art practices and strategies, combined with social justice and wellness for teachers, community members, and artists. And I recommend that you do look up these folks because that is only part of their extensive resumes that I read. welcome to our panelists, and thank you so much for your generosity this evening. We know that you are very, very busy. We're so grateful to you for accepting our invitation this evening. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So we would like to start with each of you, please, telling us about your work, right? Each of you is an educator and an activist when it comes to elevating the voices of people of color. Two of you are actually artists. Can each of you please tell us about the work that you do and what your experience is with this particular topic? Is this important? Why is it important? And do you speak with this about this with your students? Jillian, let's start with you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, of course, within the last 24 hours, I've come down with something, so I'm heavy on the tea. But if the audio doesn't come through clearly, just let me know. Thank you so much for having me here. As you mentioned, I am an educator and I have been a high school teacher for the past 21 years. So in addition to just teaching English, I also co-teach a class that focuses on issues of race, class, gender, power, positionality, et cetera, and so forth. My students, actually, we just finished a little unit talking a little bit about cultural appropriation, misappropriation, what is appropriation and what is appreciation. And so I do think that this is a topic that especially high school students need to delve into. This is the world that they are living in. They are consuming everything. They're consuming everything on their phones, every screen, advertisements, et cetera, and so forth. So to begin to unpack where some of these images come from, I'm so excited, Reverend Cobb, that you mentioned Bo Derek, because for our kids, if I mention Bo Derek, they're not going to know. But if I say like the Kardashians, right, and came out and they had their hair styled in cornrows or box braids, and everybody's just like, look at this new style. And Black girls around the world are like, what are you talking about, new style? And so it's so important for our students to have these conversations, to locate when and where they see cultural appropriation, when and where they may be enacting some cultural appropriation as well. So I look forward to talking about that a little bit more. Thank you.
Certainly, love that. Ridvan, you are unmuted. How about you?
Yes. So I'm Ridvan Idara, from founder of New Era Creative Space, and we work with children and youth, particularly middle school and high school students. And we, in Peekskill, we have a pretty diverse community of students now, where we, as far as what we do at New Era Creative Space, we use the arts as a tool to empower young people to use their voices, right, to for self-expression, but also to use their voices for social justice and for activism. And so a lot of our plays and our and the work that we do with children, we are very intentional about the kinds of topics that we talk about, and racism often comes up. And we've done a lot of plays in the past about race, about gender equality, and topics that really we want kids to be thinking critically about who they are, where they come from. About cultural appropriation, not directly do we talk about cultural appropriation, but in our plays and in the work that we do, we really focus on the history of Black people, and the beauty and of Black culture, and teaching them the history as a way of getting them to appreciate where they come from. But also we have a pretty diverse group of kids. So even when working with white kids, so that they understand, cultural appropriation is about, it's really about erasure of Black people, right? Because you could see Black culture in everything, in music, talking about the hair with Bo Derek, but at the same time, Black people are punished, because if we wear cornrows to work, that is seen as unprofessional, but it's exotic when a white person puts it on, right? And so really getting kids to think critically about the media and how the media portrays Black people is really what we focus on, and how so that they can start to unpack, you know, all of the misinformation that happens. And one of the things that we did this past last year is we took a group of 9 girls to the Gambia. And it was a really powerful trip because it was girls, it was Black and white girls. And we were really, when they got there and spending 10 days in Africa, immersed in the culture of dance and music and just like, and working with the girls in the Gambia, they started to unpack all the stereotypes. They had no, you know, they were like, we had no expectation that this would be Africa. We stayed in a village in the Gambia, and it was so many of them said that they found themselves in that culture, and they learned so much about African people, and that all those stories that they heard or their misconceptions about African people was really something that they were, what's the word? I'm losing my words. It's a long day. But anyway, they learned a lot about themselves. They learned a lot about the culture. So the work that we do is really teach our youth to think critically, to dissect what they're being, the information that's coming to them from the media, from other people, and start to appreciate culture and give, you know, when you appreciation of other cultures without appropriating it is really important. And to do that, you need to understand history. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you. And that's great work. And whenever you do an adult trip, let me know, because I wouldn't mind going to find myself in the Gambia for real. Cornell, would you like to be called Lord Judah? How do you want to?
Judah
Judah?
is fine.
All right.
Yeah.
So what say you about this?
Yeah, so when I began teaching back in 2006, I started with a program called Hip Hop Appreciation. So I always continue to keep a historic element in my workshops, but I can say from experience working in schools that I've noticed the difference in how young people perceive what we call hip hop, and like if they even call it that now, you know. So from a teaching perspective, also I've been able to see how hip hop gets used in school settings, you know, in order to try to draw the kids in. So, you know, when I realized that early in, I knew that my role was to make sure I fill those spaces. I'm in those spaces as a representative of hip hop, actually teaching it from the perspective of somebody that does it. You know, so nowadays there's websites with that, you know, with hip hop education that kids can just click on. Teachers can just download forms and whatnot. But you know, from an educated perspective, that's what I've seen and experienced, and come to realize like hip hop is being used for commercials. Hip hop also is being used to draw kids into school, which is a good thing. But when you don't have the actual participants, the information and the lessons, then it's a disconnect. So you want to always have.
So Judah, let me just interrupt you. We want to hear everything you're saying, and I think you're right. So try to turn your camera off and see if you're clearer, because we're having some interference and we want to hear you.
Okay. How about now? You hear me good now?
It's a little better. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so from the perspective of the teaching artists, going into schools, working for years with all ages, you know, I've just always tried to fill that space to where there's an actual representative of a practitioner of the art form that is teaching it, so that I can include the history piece forward, even taking it back to jazz in the early beginnings of Black music, so that young people understand like the origins. You know, even dreadlocks now, or like you see young people with dreadlocks, and then they don't necessarily know the origins of that. you know, but everybody has dreads. You see the rappers with dreads, but there's no reference to like where did it come from anymore. So the connection gets lost of the intention behind a lot of what we do as hip hop and what young people see as like an amazing thing, but it's connected to, you know, an intention from Black people in this country to rise up, you know. So message gets lost in money, you know, sex and all the other things. But you know, I'm always at that place where I'm finding a way to have them realize that like more than what you see. So
Thank you. That goes into some other questions that we have. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to AJ. And I just do want to let you know, you do have a very bad connection. It's hard for us to hear you. I don't know if you can go out and come back in or if it's just where you're at. But I just wanted to let you know that how we're receiving you. What you're saying is beautiful. I want people to hear you.
It sounds like some rattling paper or something when you talk. Sounds like somebody's crumbling paper when you talk. So I got questions, but I want to make a statement first. And I don't know if everybody agrees with me. I think there's two things. There's appropriation and there's misappropriation. Now, as a hip hop head, as a rapper, I guess when you're an artist, you're always an artist, even if you don't do it anymore. We were known in hip hop for, I guess, what would be called appropriation. We took bits and pieces of everything, and then we combined it and made it ourselves. And even with styles, we took Timberland boots that were made for work, you know, people doing construction and made that our own. We took Carhartt jackets, we took, you know, golf wear, and we made it our own. Now that would be appropriation. You know what I'm saying? But misappropriation would be like when you take somebody's stuff and try to pass it off in full. Like back in the days, there were Black groups that would make a hot song, but because they were Black, the label didn't want the people to know they were Black, so they would do a video showing white people singing their songs. Or like the CNC Music Factory situation, where Martha Walsh, who was one of the Weather Girls, who sang that beautiful hook, but she was a big girl, so she wasn't like thin and sexy. So they took this model French speaking, I don't even know if she could speak English well, and put her in the video like she sang the song. Now that's misappropriation. So I think there's two different things here, and I just wanted to make that clarity, I don't know, for the conversation. But my question would be for y'all, and it's kind of a two-part question. How does art and culture appropriation affect communities of color? Does it weaken or strengthen our racial identity? And the second half of the question is, how does it affect artists of color? Does it weaken or strengthen our voice and our position in the market? And any of the artists or that want to speak on that?
Can I jump in? Because I really
Please.
felt what you were saying too in terms of appropriation and misappropriation. And the best way I think about it in my head is, right, if we think about appropriation, I'm thinking of like a remix, like you said, right? Like we're taking like tracks, we're taking, you know, samples, right, from other places. But I also think it has to do with who is doing the taking, right? Like who is doing the using. And so there is a power dynamic, right? Like what we would call remix within the culture, right? Within Black culture is something that we are recreating, or even taking something that has been aligned with whiteness, right? Like I'm thinking about the remix of The Little Mermaid that's happening, right? That's got people all up in arms, right? And so everybody's like, wait, The Little Mermaid, Ariel, she's white. And we're like, but she's a figment of somebody's imagination, right? So when did we racialize her to be a certain way? Within Black and Brown culture, I think because representation matters, what we've been talking about here, everybody is talking about this idea of representation. If we don't see ourselves, we are going to create spaces where we are, right? That is part of our culture. And so we may take from dominant culture, what people call dominant culture, and remix and make our own. Now, when people take from our culture, right? When people take from those who have been historically marginalized and limited and aren't giving us our due, right? Or are acting as if they have created what it is that they have misappropriated, right? Then I think that's where that misappropriation begins. Am I making sense?
Absolutely.
All right, good. It's like class time. I love it. And so if we talk about the effect in terms of like communities of color, I do want to say that within Black culture, I think that there is what has always been known as like a social capital, like, right? Like Black is cool, whether we're talking about like the music, the style, the language. And this is something that I see with my students very often, that there's still this cultural capital of like, you know, we want to grab on, we want to be able to like have that swag, whatever it is that they're talking about. And so the idea that, you know, when we're out in the world, when our music is out there, when our style is out there, when our hairstyle is out there, our nails, right, our accessories, and people begin to look at that and see that as cool, a wider, whiter world, they want to latch on to that, right? And misappropriation then begins and continues and continues. So again, I don't want to take up too much airtime, but I think that I think the beauty in this, I believe is what Ridvan was talking about too. The beauty of our culture is that like people love it. People want to be in it. They want to see it. They want to hear it. They want to eat it, right? They want to consume it in all these different ways. And then forget that we are the origin of it, right? They claim it as their own.
And then cut us out, right?
That's exactly it, right? And that's part of that idea of being historically excluded from these larger concepts.
Would anybody else like to touch that question?
Just like to piggyback on what Jillian is saying, you know, this loving of Black culture and Black music, but disrespecting Black people, right? It's not just about giving them their due, but also disrespecting Black, you know, because there's lots of people who will be, you know, want to dress Black and look Black and act Black and sing Black, but, you know, then are racist against Black people and treat Black people. So there's that happening. And then there's also this making money, you know, where a Black artist who sings the same, you know, sings the same music or music that has been appropriated from Black culture, but gets paid less. You know, some white person will come and popularize it and then make more money from that work. And that is, so I do feel like Black people, you know, get the raw end of this deal, because we have, and it's not just in America, honestly, it's worldwide, you know, where, yeah, I was just looking at K-pop music, you know, and the disrespect of Black people while taking their culture and using it and then really monetizing, right? Making a lot of money and not giving any credit for where it comes from, but also worse is being racist against the very people whose culture you're trying to, you know. So these are some of the things that we try to unpack with young people, you know, so that they can just know and know how to fight and use their voices for positive change in the world. And so anyway.
Did anybody else want to touch that question?
No, I think,
Hey, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Who's this?
Hi, how's everyone doing? Can you see us? Can you see me?
Yes. Yes, we see you and hear you. Yes, we see you and hear you.
So just not necessarily answering the question, but just to piggyback off the Kardashians and the Bo Derek grades as well. There was a show, I watched the Kardashians, but there was one reality show that they did, and basically she said that, oh yeah, these are the Bo Derek grades from the lady back in the day, and I just feel like there's robbery, but there's also something I watched before where this white lady basically said that she had to take her braids out. She had braids like cornrows in, but she had to take them out because she didn't feel like it was appropriate for the interview, but it was appropriate for her regular life. And that's just it. That's all I had to say about that.
You know, I'm going to the next question, and I did want to add something though. It's the disrespect part. I think, I'm not sure if it was Jillian that said that. The disrespect, like not understanding the culture, but wanting to take some of the elements of it, maybe the more ignorant elements, or thinking it has to be ghetto to be hip hop. A classic example is when Vanilla Ice came out. I don't know if anybody remembers this, and he brings Ice Ice Baby out, and he's in the Source magazine talking about his life in the hood and how he got stabbed one time coming home from school, and none of this happened. He didn't live in the neighborhood. He said it was the neighborhood Luke is from. Luke's like, this dude is not from here, you know, but he thought he had to be that to be hip hop. You understand what I'm saying? Because not understanding our culture, he only gravitated on the ignorant elements of hip hop and thought that was hip hop. And I see that even in Japan, there's a whole group of Japanese young people, they call themselves dressing hip hop now. And it's, you know, the more loosely, more gang related, more ignorant aspects of it, but that's what they grab onto, thinking that they are dressing and speaking hip hop, and they don't understand the culture. They just got that one aspect of it. So I definitely wanted to share that. Here's another question, and it is a two-part question. Do you think, and that's funny after I just said, do you think white artists are becoming more conscious or less conscious of their choices they make when they use media that was created by persons of color? I think I just talked about that a little bit. Have you ever had this conversation in mixed crowds and received pushback? And our panelists, that want to answer that question. I see Jillian shaking her head, so go ahead. I see you shaking your head.
I'm just like responding. I'm like, yes, I'm taking notes, but I want to make sure, yes. And I know we're talking music, art, but like, right, when I talk misappropriation and appropriation with my students, we're just talking the culture at large, right? And so what ended up happening in our discussion this week is there is a Black hair product that is Black owned, sold, right? Like in Target, et cetera, and so forth. And I know you're talking about white artists in particular, but I just want to talk about how this operates, right, in society at large. White women started using this Black hair product and tweeting about it, Instagramming about it, et cetera, and so forth. So much so that Black women were like going to the shelves, like, where is this product, right? It's being taken, it's being snatched off the shelves. And so, there was like there's a conversation that's happening on social media between like Black and white women, and Black women were like, not everything is for you. Like, it's okay that we have some things, because for so long we were outside of this conversation, right? You mentioned, AJ, the disrespect. And I want to throw out the erasure, right? The erasure of anything Black and brown related, right? So like back in the day, like, Lena Horne can't find makeup in her complexion, or right, any of the Black actresses, et cetera. Like, we're not even there. And then when we do become part of the market, right, then other people are still kind of like, oh, but that's cute too. Like, I want a little bit of that. And so again, we're outside of that conversation. So I wanted to bring it. I know that there are like music artists and art artists, fine artists here. When I talk about like literature in my classroom, or art in my classroom, I'm talking about like using the world as text. And I want us to see that appropriation is happening in all facets.
And to piggyback off what you're saying, the Koreans taking over the beauty market, and in our neighborhoods selling us the products, sometimes inferior products, and the disrespect they treat us as customers when they go in there, but they come into our community, and I heard that. That's what I heard in my head when you said that, though. Anyone in the panel, any other panelists want to touch upon this?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Am I good now?
So much
Yes.
better. Thank you.
So much better.
Yeah.
Yes, brother.
So I think about a lot about social justice. I work for a lot of organizations, arts-based organizations, and a couple of years back, I started to notice the use of the term social justice in a lot of mission statements. So, over the course of the disseminating of the social justice, none of the people look like us in regards to talking about the issues, and even bringing it, even when talking about bringing social justice into schools in order to help disrupt and dismantle, some of the institutional issues that we're facing. But there were not people that looked like me going into the schools talking about social justice. Now it's the awareness is beginning to shift, and the step back is beginning to happen, where people that look like me can step in and talk about, the issues that we're dealing with in regards to social justice. But it became a tagline that a lot of organizations took on and got a lot of funds from in order to heal Black and brown communities. And the people that were doing the healing didn't look like us. So that term, social justice, that's what keyed in for me when I thought about that.
Ridvan, do you have anything to add on that particular thing?
I'm sitting here and thinking about the question whether or not artists are becoming more conscious about appropriation and giving credit. And I can't say I know the answer to that, because I continue to see a lot of, appropriation and not giving credit. And we live in a capitalist society. Media, music is all about making money. And I just feel like there are some, yes. And but I really feel like we have to keep, getting our voices out there and talking about this and having these conversations about this and making it become more aware. Because when I look at the industry, I still see a lot of appropriation going on, cultural appropriation going on. And so when you ask that question, do I see people giving credit? And I think there is, of course, an awareness because we are talking about it more, for sure. But I still see a lot of, taking credit for the Black culture and things that Black people, I mean, even in TikTok and dance moves, I'm like, I look at Instagram and all of these, I see all of these African kids on the street doing their moves and their dance. No one is ever going to give them credit for that, But then a white person will do it and get millions of likes, and then a talk show host will call them on to show the dance. And it's really frustrating because the credit is not given. People are creating moves and stuff, and it's, and how do you get credit for this work? So it's a tough question. I don't know the answer to that. If there's more, I just feel like there's still a lot of capitalism going on, and on Black on Black music and art.
Do you feel that if there were more Black people in power? The reason I asked, there were movies like Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society by Black producers that were very good movies and made us point. But after that, they made every hood movie after it. They didn't have the quality of the movie and just had more of the ignorance. And they thought that it was made by people that wasn't like us, for us, thinking that's what we wanted to see. And that's, again, with the disrespect and making money off of something that was, both of those movies told stories. They were hard movies, but they told stories from Black producers. And then, you had all these copies, come out afterwards from people that wasn't like us.
Yeah, I think we have to start telling our stories more. I mean, I'll bring the example of Wakanda forever. And what I love about that movie is all the Black people involved in creating it. And, and a movie where Black people are not seen as, for so long we've been portrayed as, ignorant, and movies has been made about Black people to degrade Black people, right? Or if it's a movie uplifting a Black person, there's always a white savior involved that gets all the credit, So I think we need to start telling our stories, writing about, the Black culture is so complex and so diverse and so beautiful, and we have to, tell all of it, and educate our children. Really, my work as an educator is really to educate our children, Black and white, about the diversity and beauty of the Black culture, you know, and how for so long, so many, you know, when I think of even like music, like country music, the banjo, you know, how many people know that the banjo was created by Black slaves? You know, these are the stories we need to tell our children so that they know the history, or even about the cornrow, right? It's, you know, Black people used it to map as maps for, you know, when they were trying to escape from slavery. There was, you know, a message there. And white and in Africa, cornrows was like about our identity and about who we are. There's a beauty there that it's not explained. It's not some exotic thing that you put on, or, you know, there's history behind it. And that's what we need to teach our children, about that history.
Yeah, one
I'm
of
gonna
the
pass the
things
mic,
that,
I'm gonna pass the mic to Lane up a little bit late. Was Lord Judah trying to say something when I was speaking? Did you? I think I might have cut you
Yeah,
off.
I was gonna piggyback off of what Rizwan said about the young people in Africa dancing, and just the whole idea about the internet, and a lot of our talents getting sourced by the internet, but we're not controlling all those platforms. And the reason why a white people or a white person could capitalize off of the kids dancing or what have you, because they have access to how to capitalize off of the internet, how to monetize videos, you know. So we dance in front of the camera, but we don't get the information about how you can turn your computer into money. You know, so this should be no reason why now music takes you 10,000 streams to make $1,000, you know. But if we have understanding of how to create our own machines, is getting there, you know, our own machines on these computers that will source our audience right to what we control, then the thing starts to shift. So a lot about technology is where things are going, and we need to take the helm in regards to that, even as far as education, just controlling the machines of whatever we want to generate, you know. So
My apologies for interrupting Lane. I'm passing the mic.
no, you're all good. Thanks for this great conversation. You know, what you all are talking about, I just wanted to, I want to lift up that identity piece, right? Because, you know, culture is your identity, fashion is your identity, language is your identity. And it's generational. It goes way back. It's centuries old. And so we want to remember also that this is just not a black-white conversation, right? When we're talking about cultures and ethnicities of old cultures, and any indigenous populations know, right, that they just had all their culture just raped, they just raped, you know, of all of their stuff as well, and just had that dumped into the mainstream and then misappropriated and used. And I remember going to Taos, New Mexico, and speaking with an indigenous woman who said to me, you know, our language is not written. We do not on purpose write it down. She said, we maintain the oral traditions. And one of the reasons we do that is so it can't be stolen. She said, because we don't want our stuff stolen anymore. We don't write it down. And I think one of the things that has happened in assimilation very often is we lose our oral traditions. So what Rizwan was saying, we have to tell our stories and retell our stories and retell our stories with all of the history and the embellishments and the reasons behind, oh, do you know the meaning behind this? You know, so the drumming and whatever it is, this color, this type of ink, this ink stroke, this dance movement, right? How about we don't have any dancers in particular represented here, but I know that we have some in the room, if you will, right? And so that dance movement is ceremonial. There is so much significance to that, right? And that makes us, it is elevating us, and it also makes us vulnerable. And for So for us to keep these things sacred, we have to nurture each other and lift each other up and teach each other. And also, you're right, Judah, what you said, it's like teach each other how to be for each other. So that whole thing about supporting people of color in our business ventures, our artistic ventures, and keeping it sacred is so important. Having our identity co-opted is very damaging. And we've seen, as I think Jillian was saying, the erasure of cultures over time. So what's the risk here? We want to engage, we want to be involved, we want to share, right? We need to grow, we need to participate. What's the risk to people of color, communities of color, artists of color in engaging in the popular, the trade, if you will? What's the risk and what's the gain?
Any of our panelists want to
I know,
touch
did
that?
I ask a trick question? I know y'all got an answer.
So you're saying what's the risk?
What's the risk and what is the gain, right? To our culture, to our art forms, our dance, our music, our fashion. What's the risk and what's the gain in continuing to participate and to contribute? Because we're going to do that. What's the risk and what's the gain?
Well, I'll go from the game perspective. I like to think in terms of incentives and the law of incentives. So the gain, if we get the reins of technology behind us and learn how to disseminate our culture in blurbs and small snippets at a time, because the attention span on computers is very short. So we have to develop techniques that will allow us to give as much as we can in small snippets, especially to our young people. And, you know, and once we really learn how to exploit technology, it'll be a lot easier for us to continue to serve our culture up. And then more things will sprout out of it. So, you know, more ideas will come, because with the new generation, of course, they'll have new ideas, but it'll be based upon the seeds that we were planted. So that's how I look at it from the game perspective. I don't know about the deficit.
That's all right. No, that's a good answer. Thank you. Lift it up.
I think we have to risk in order to gain, right? I think we can't stop. We have to keep, because when I think of our ancestors and what they risked so that we can be here today, we've made gains. You know, we have a long way to go in this, you know, racialized world that we live in. And but I feel like you always have to risk in order to gain. So we have to keep putting our work out there and holding people accountable, you know, and speaking up and supporting each other and lifting each other up. And because I think it's going to be a while before, you know, Black culture is given its due. But I feel like we can't stop. I feel like we have to keep going, but we really have to become a community that supports one another, you know, that educates our children and tell them the history, right, of our people and the resilience of our people, and you know, and the beauty of our people, and empower them to keep putting, because art is healing, you know, art is transformative, art is healing, and we have to keep using it as a tool to voice, to express ourselves, and to voice, you know, the injustices in the world. So yeah, I feel like we have to risk a lot to gain eventually.
I want to just add to that before I ask the next question. I also believe we have to control whether it's what Lord Judah was talking about in the IT or control. We have to control the narrative. We have to tell the story. I started Black Westchester to change the narrative. And I was able to do stories when I came up across Lord Judah years ago. You know what I'm saying? Someone who maybe News 12 wouldn't celebrate or you wouldn't read about the journal news. I was able to, share his story with a lot of people through a lot of our community in Westchester. So it's like, and that's my one way of kind of changing the narrative, but we have to have control of the entities that are putting out the work that we're putting out, and as we have to hold even our own accountable to make sure even our own don't take advantage of us. I mean, let's not forget that. We always talk about everybody else. We need to hold our own accountable a lot too. So, my next question is.
Can I jump in real quick though?
Oh, absolutely, please.
If that's okay,
please,
thank you.
Please.
Only in line with all of this, because I'm thinking about the classroom and I'm thinking about the impact for students is to know that like our story does not begin with the enslavement, right? Like knowing, because I think for our students who are sitting in these classrooms who, right, and Black History Month is like upon us, and we tell the heroes and holidays approach to Blacks, and I think that when students understand the ways in which Black people have navigated so many different spaces as creators, as inventors, as intellectuals, right? Like what's happening is, yes, we have shared our brilliance like with the world, and some of that was taken from us, absolutely. But I think that our students need to know, so much of this conversation is about knowing history. When students know that, they understand that like we are not subjects in this story, like we are also creating this story, as you were saying. I think the more that we put out there, and because we live in a capitalist consumer culture, we also have to then uplift and buy Black. I think we have to support Black and brown thinkers and creators and artists and writers, right? Like I think that we have to do that. That's our responsibility to do that, to ensure that this brilliance continues to grow. And Reverend Cobb, you had asked like the loss of it. And I do believe, very much like, Paul Laurence Dunbar said, we still wear the mask, like we still put it on in certain times, depending on like, where we feel safe. And we still have to take that off. And so I think that we still find ourselves in spaces and places where that mask is on and it's tight. And we know that we can't be our true, authentic selves. But we find places, with our loved ones, our safe spaces, where we're able to take it all off. Yeah, I saw that in the comment. Buy Black. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to know, we're going to open it up to the audience if you have any questions. But before we do that, I wanted to give Tamara and Jermaine a chance if they had any questions to get their questions in real quick.
I have a couple statements I want to make, and then I have a question. I'll just leave it to one question, but I think we're talking a lot of different things. So one thing we were mentioning, like the hip hop and the culture, and I think I want to separate hip hop and the culture of hip hop from rap and the industry.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think a lot of people, if you're not aware, if you're not following music and understand, hip hop is a culture that's tied to dance and art and music and that's different from rap industry and mimicking whoever's popular. So I want to make sure we separate that, because I think there's definitely a divide in that. And when we're talking about appropriation and misappropriation, there's a line between being inspired and appreciating a culture and the stuff that you're working with, and exploiting it or imitating it for laughs or whatever that is. So I think doing that, and we see it across art, so you can be influenced. And I think hip hop is a great example of that. And AJ and Lord Judah mentioned that hip hop would sample music because they appreciated the sound, and they said, oh, this is a great sound, I can reproduce that and make it my own and to be something fantastic. So they had appreciation for what they were working with, and they molded that into something that fit their community and what they were doing, right? So there was an appreciation for someone's art before them. But when you take it and you dominate someone's creativity. And we've seen it even with video games, and the lawsuits has been going on with Fortnite and the dances that they misappropriated, right? So they took someone else's creative art and put it into their video games to generate revenue, right? Without giving credit to that original artist. And so when we talk about that, I think there's this incredible, and I think social media has just multiplied this problem, right? Because it gave so many people an outlet to appropriate or misappropriate someone else's creative arts. And like I said, we've seen it even influence from Picasso with African art. Picasso was influenced by African artists, right? So he never give that credit. So there's a lot of things that we're talking about within that. And then Jillian mentioned in the classroom, we talk about telling our stories. And one of the issues and one of the reasons we started INU is because in the classroom, our students learn about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks from kindergarten to 12th grade to college, right? As if there was no other people involved in social justice or no other people involved in the work that happened in society that really get us to where we're going. So I think control that narrative like AJ and telling those other stories is part of this. Like we have to tell people about those people in between the lines that are not the popular people and not the ones that may not have move the needle as much or may not have ruffled as much feathers. So I think there's a lot of people in those conversations that are missed out. So I think in that vein, and we've seen it in the sports industry, one of my questions lean into this a lot with the the seminal chop that they do in stadiums where you take in the culture of Native America, the indigenous, right? My question goes into the different tiers where this conversation happens, right? We talk about appropriation and misappropriation, and Jillian, for you an example, in education, you're making decisions at an administrative level, at an educator level, and dealing with things in the classroom. How does this topic really affect your decision making at those different levels? Like your administrator hat, like what does those conversations look like as opposed to being in a classroom dealing with students? And I guess with Ridvan and Lord Judah, it's kind of a similar conversation, Lord Judah, from the music perspective as an industry executive as opposed to an artist, and Ridvan as a program developer, an art, creative mind. And then what are you doing in programs across the country with the work that you're doing? How are those hats affecting you differently, especially for the people on the call? Because some of these people may be part of those conversations and some of that may help them. So how does your hat that you're wearing at that time, how does it affect those different things that you're dealing with?
Great question. Can we get Jillian, Ridvan, and then Lord Judah to answer that question?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So I am not an administrator. Never want to be either. I do work with them closely, but there's a reason why, because I love my impact to be that of my colleagues as an instructional coach, and then my students, right, as an educator. But I will tell you, and this is very real to life, teaching in Ossining, Ossining's mascot used to be the Indian. And, in Ossining, right, there are still like those who are attempting to be like Indian forever. But, part of our conversation, which really led, one of my students is on the line, maybe he'll, I saw he had a question earlier, but we had a 5-day discussion in terms of Indians as mascots. Like, why is this dangerous, right? Like, what is it doing? What are we aligning the Native American experience with, right? If we are using the mascot in line with like the Panthers and the Eagles and right, and Bears. So what exactly are we saying in terms of now appropriating? Because we're in Ossining, our students are so brilliant. And then they began pushing in terms of understanding, right, that was an administrative choice, and it's no longer a choice, that schools do have to get rid of Indian mascots like within this calendar year. But the students began pushing about, well, what about places like Indian Village, right? Like, what about all the places in Ossining that are named after? What about Sing Sing, right? Like, what about that and the homage to like the Sing Sing Indians? So like, is there a way that we can both remember and understand our history and understand the land, the occupied land that we are living on, and pay some kind of homage while also knowing that we are here because they are no longer, right? Because the ones who were here before are no longer. And so we just had this in-depth conversation. And I'll tell you, I don't want my students walking out of the classroom thinking like there's like this right or wrong answer, but that it's complicated, right? When we talk about like the history, when we talk about issues of, okay, we can get rid of the mascot, but it's a lot more difficult to get rid of an address, right? Like we're talking fiscal changes, we're talking zoning changes. And so what can we do? What can we add as a community? Should there be placards, around Ossining, talking about the indigenous history? And so it gets us thinking. So I think to your answer and thinking about like these different hats, I'm thinking as an educator, what kind of complexities do I want my kids reckoning with, my students, right? What types of things do I want them hopefully talking about too when they go home with their parents who may not even know some of these histories themselves, right? We're talking about issues of education and filling in those histories. And shout out to you, Jermaine. I just wanted to tell you, yes, our kids only learn about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, and they only learned that Rosa Parks was like tired. And that bothers me too, that she was, you know what I mean? They don't know her history, that she was from the jump a social justice warrior. So, okay.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. I love the passion. We have some passion on our panel today. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Ridvan and Lord Judah, would you like to answer that question briefly?
I always start my workshops with young people with asking them how they're feeling. So when I notice when I'm doing that, it lets me know with my eye contact with each and every one of them that they're being recognized. Whatever is going on for them is being recognized. How are you doing? So from there, I can bring in discussions about healing. And from healing, we can then talk about some of the things that are in this world that are meant to harm us, and how can we learn how to cope with them and work around them. So you can scale that out. I can always world, so I've always been a person that tries to bring healing into the dialogue. But I started off with the little things about, just how are you feeling, today.
Ridvan, did you want to answer that question?
Yes, I mean, I have the privilege, I guess, of being the founder and executive director of my organization. So, which gives me a lot of, as the administrator in my case, to build infrastructure, right? So one of the things that we're doing is we, culture with all the staff that we hire, we put them through a culturally responsive training. Understanding culture and understanding that there's implicit bias in how we see and work with our kids. And everybody has it. Black people have it, white people have it, we all have it, because we lived in this, we've been, raised in this racialized society. And so I get to, have our staff go through that training, go through a restorative justice training. So that they really, the idea is to see the nobility in our children. So when we're teaching them the arts or theater or whatever it is that we're teaching them, we are seeing them as noble human beings and not seeing them as Black kids out to be in trouble and punishing them and being punitive because they're Black and because of our implicit bias. And really, so we get to kind of create the culture that we want in our organization. And that's what, the past, we're now in our 10th year, especially the past few years with 2020 and everything that was going on in the society, is just being very intentional about making sure that our staff, are being trained to work better with our children, to see their beauty, to see their nobility. And then creating, during the pandemic, we decided to do our play. It was called Melanin Magic. And so we took the kids through the history of from Africa, of Black people from Africa to present, and gave them a space where they could talk about it, and they wrote poems about it. And this was happening while, George Floyd and everything that was happening in the society. And these children wrote some amazing spoken art, but we gave them a space to really deal with and kind of unpack what was going on and how they were feeling about it all. And so at the end they had this amazing play called Melanin Magic, which was just acknowledging Black culture and really taking them through their history so that they can understand what's going on in society and how we got here, right? And that, because I think sometimes it's, young Black people think it's them. When they don't understand the context, the history, then it becomes, I am, less than. And so we have to really get rid of that and teach them about their history, the resilience of their people. And so that's what that's what I get to play around with and create a different culture. So I'm really excited to be able to do that.
And that's what I was talking about when we talk about controlling our destiny. What you just said, you control, and it's equally important for Jillian and Cornell to be in the room where it happens, where the room with, like Jermaine said, in the room where the decisions are made, to be able to represent and make sure that we're present in those rooms, so that when it comes down to teaching our kids, also, I didn't see any questions from the audience yet, so I'll go to the last question that I had. And music and everything to me is music, but art is a whole, though. Every movement we ever had, there was a music that was the soundtrack. Music has been healing. I know art and music are healing. So, when you go to the classroom, how do you use that as a tool for racial healing and for awareness, if any of y'all want to touch upon that? Nobody?
AJ, I also, before
I have
we go,
something. You
oh,
hear
I'm
me?
sorry, go ahead. Judah, go ahead.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah. So I created a program called, co-created a program called Highly Intelligent People Healing Our Planet. And that was the acronym for hip hop. So always using art to drive messages, definitely messages about healing. That is how art can help people view the world, and and heal from a lot of the ills in the world. So yeah, I mean, art and music, is a way, and it's just in how we decide to message it.
We have a few questions in the chat, and I apologize because that's what you were asked to do. If you wanted to put your question in the chat, and I did not check the chat, so that's my bad. Gabriel said, my question is more of a learning question, but I heard someone use the term dreadlocks earlier in the discussion, and I've heard a lot of discourse on the term. What's the difference between dreads and locks? I'd like to hear your opinion.
Okay, yeah, so that was me. And just my opinion on it is, people viewed dreadlocks or locks as dangerous or scary, when at that time when locks were just a part of Rastafarian culture. So it got associated with scary and dread. So that was the association of people that wore the hairstyle that were kind of like anti-society and establishment. So to demonize those people, that term came about. But a person using it now, if they have the context, to me, it doesn't matter how you use, if you say dreads or locks, if you understand the context, then, it's fine. But sometimes I say dreads, sometimes I say locks. A student asked me yesterday, what kind of hair I had because I had my big hat on. He didn't know I had locks. He thought my hair was curly. So I said, no, I got dreads.
Dreads are also people. Like they're dreads. That's a culture. So I just wanted to add that too. There are actually there's a culture of Caribbean-based individuals that the dreads, Jamaicans, they're dread. Trey Lee said, I think it's difficult to control our destiny because we need institutions for full self-determination. And in white Hamid, I can't pronounce that word, Lane. Yes. Society.
Hegemonic.
Yes, there you go. I didn't want to mess it up. Society, the institutions are believed to be the property of the majority race. So we need more ideas in how to go on a cultural offense and to gain part of ownership of our own civic and cultural institutions. Would anybody like to address that?
I'd love to. Yes. Trey, you better go ahead talking about, issues of power and in primarily white institutions, right? In terms of like our school systems, in terms of, higher education, in terms of certain spaces in the workplace. You're absolutely right. However, and this is what I've been reminding my students, when we talk about Black and brown people, when we talk about BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous people of color, I have been shifting my language because we have to shift. We're no longer a minority population. We are a global majority. And I know that scares some people, right? But yes. when we begin to shift that language and talk about how we are a global majority, and so absolutely, are there pockets, and there will remain pockets of whiteness, and there will remain pockets of power, but the world is getting browner and blacker. And so in order for us, all of us, to figure out how to work, live, love among one another, we have to begin shifting this idea that we are no longer, those who are melanated, are no longer a minority. We are a global majority, and there is power in that, right? Not just simply power in numbers, but power in that we are growing, cultivating, as everybody's talking about, creating intellectual property, adding into our environment. From day one, we've been doing that. It's only now, I think, that people are seeing the power that we maintain. Think about the buying power in the Black community, Black and brown communities. We're a force to be reckoned with. And, institutions have to catch up because we're here, we're not going anywhere. We haven't gone anywhere despite their attempts to erase us. And so, Trey, you absolutely have to navigate these spaces. You find your people wherever you are in these spaces to help you navigate the whiteness, the power, the roadblocks, the glass ceilings for those of us who identify as female, and you keep moving, because again, global majority. Let's not even use the term minority anymore. It's over.
Okay, and we got two more questions. And just to add to that, they fear the browning of this world. They fear the brown, and that's why you see even in Washington the trying to maintain control at any cost, because they fear, and the thing they fear we're going to do to them what they did to us, and we're not that as a people, and that's what they fear the most. Getting back to the question, Gabriel said, in creating a cultural responsive curriculum, what steps do you feel we need to take in order to change the narrative of Blackness?
I think Ridvan spoke to that earlier. Someone else can go ahead and
change the narrative of Blackness. Well, when I'm in a community, I try to highlight the artists, from an artist perspective. I try to highlight the artists that are from that community so that it can create an potential opportunity for me to connect those young people with that artist that comes from that neighborhood, so that they can have dialogue about, where they grew up and, share the similarities. So as far as making our story relevant in the classroom and strengthening it. I'm just going back to us really having to learn how to really strategize using technology. So being able to tell long stories in short snippets is how we're going to really be able to disseminate as much information as we can. We have a rich culture, a rich history that is just as powerful as technology is. So it's about melding the two. And we have to kind of lean on those folks that really are tech savvy and have them be the scribes of our stories so we can get it to the young people. It's at the pace that they're learning, because they're learning, school is kind of getting outpaced by the internet, you know, so.
We,
Can I add something? I'm sorry. Just
please.
I think one thing, we're not a monolithic society, right? So I think one thing we have to understand, like we're not one thing. That definition of Blackness runs a spectrum of creativity, abilities, visual aesthetics. Like there's a whole different element to when you talk about adding that to the curriculum. I think one thing we have to do is normalize the conversation, right? Let's stop teaching only in February about Black people. Let's make it part of the entire curriculum throughout the year and introduce it in a way that is just part of the conversation normally. And I think if you do that, then people it just becomes an unconscious thing where, oh, there's an engineer, and then the Black aspect of it fades away. I think what we're doing is we highlight it because we say Black history, that little 28 days is like, okay, we're going to teach you about the 3 Black people that you heard about since you were 3, and that's it. And then outside of that, we talk about everyone else, right? So, and we do that for a lot of different cultures. But I think if you're talking about changing the curriculum, just add someone to the conversation as part of your normal conversation and have people identify with someone that looks like them. And I think if you do that, that will go so much further than doing it during Black History Month.
Agreed. We had one last question, and if anyone wants to touch this briefly, white singer Gwen Stefani recently said, "I am Japanese." Could anyone get some advice on how to react to that? If anyone wants to touch that real briefly.
Don't react to it.
Ah, there you go.
Don't react. Don't feed into that nonsense, please. I know she went through her motions and her girl group, and don't react to it. Don't give it power.
There you go. Lane.
Yep.
Before, can I give each of our panelists a chance to briefly, if people want to get in touch with you, want to know more about you, website, social media, email maybe, and would you like to share? Jillian, Ridvan, Lord Judah, and
yes, please speak it and put it in the chat for our folks, please. Go for it.
Sorry, I was about to type. Yes, I am at, my school email is at Ossining, UFSD. I'll type that in the chat. Yeah, that's probably the best place for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my email, I'm going to put it in the chat, is redara@necspace.org, and you can find me at my website to information at the website, but I just put it in the text.
Okay.
And say the name of your organization again, please, Ridvan.
New Era Creative Space.
Thank you.
Lord Judah?
Yeah. I just put my my Instagram tag in the chat and also my email, but my website is trueheartacademy.com, so that you can kind of look at some of the work that I have devoted towards adults. Yeah.
And spell that, please. That has a special spelling, right? True Art.
Yeah.
True Art.
Well, I mean, it had the abbreviation on art, but you just True Art Academy.
Okay.
How it
Beautiful.
sounds.
All right.
Jermaine.
Google it. It'll
Okay,
come up.
sorry. My bad. Jermaine, would you like to, your organization, website, email, anything? To get in touch with
Yep, absolutely. So I'm here representing Arts 10566, as you guys know, the web page is up as well. But our organization, my organization is NU Builds. It stands for Empower, Network, and Uplift. We do have a website, nubuilds.com. It's a little bit outdated, but as far as the content that we have, but we'll update that. But you can definitely follow us there. And we're on Facebook and Instagram as well, and I'll enter that information in. We also have a standing meeting every Monday at 6 for just open to anyone in the community that want to be engaged in any type of conversation around youth engagement, community engagement, youth development. So, and if you want to get involved in any of that, I'll enter my email address is jermaine@nubuilds.com.
And Tamara, I saw you just come back on. Are you there? I did see you.
Yes,
okay.
thank you. I'm sorry. I was just running in from a basketball game. So thank you everybody for being in attendance. I was listening on the Facebook stream, which was really great to be able to do that. So I heard everybody's input. It was a very interesting conversation. And of course, I'm on the other side, not being able to talk, going, oh, I want to jump in and say this, and oh, I want to jump in and say that. So I appreciate Reverend Cobb, AJ. Thank you for leading this conversation, and thank you to the panelists for participating. We appreciate your time and efforts. Thank you.
And I pass the mic to Reverend Lane Carr to take us out.
Thank you so much to our panelists and our audience. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We have one more of these conversations about the intersection between the arts and cultures and race. It is going to be on February 9th, and that will be our final panel discussion. Our topic will be life lessons, cultural conversations to guide you through career, life, and relationships. Our panelists are going to be the world-renowned artist Vinnie Bagwell, founder of Rituals Dance Company in New York City, Nathan Trice, and award-winning actress and storyteller April Armstrong. What I'd like to do is, let me see, I have messed up my view on my screen, so I can't tell how much time there is, but I'd like to invite each of our panelists to give some closing words of advice. What is your call to action for us today? Ridvan, you're unmuted. You want to start?
That's not why I was unmuted, but sure. What is call to action? I think, keep having these conversations and holding people accountable, holding ourselves accountable and holding people accountable and telling our stories. Yeah, for the white people in, the audience, listen to Black people, listen to their stories and lift them up and be part of this fight for justice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, try to find and locate people that are very tech savvy, media savvy, and utilize them to help tell the stories of the folks within the communities that you serve, the historians within the community that you serve, and really just, if you can't yourself get a hold of the technology and use it in the pace that it's growing, find some young people, find some people that can do that and put them in front of the storytellers, and the magic will happen. And
Okay.
If I could, I'd love to end with actually a quote from one of my students. I told them that I might do this. Her name is Ruby. She's a senior. She said this in class where we were talking about issues of cultural appropriation. She said, you can think something is beautiful and great and aesthetically pleasing and not take it for yourself.
Beautiful, beautiful. Everybody who wants to reach out to me, my website is blackwestchester.com. Everything I do is on there. On social media, I'm either at Black Westchester on everything, or my name at Mr. AJ Woodson, Mr. AJ Woodson. You can find me on all social media platforms, and I am there. And Lane Cobb. And I want to thank Lane for allowing me to take this journey with her and be a part of this this conversation on her platform. I really appreciate that.
Indeed, it's an honor and a pleasure to journey with you, AJ, and with you all. Trey asked, what do these discussions look like outside of panel form? Trey, you have the community, you have the contact for all our panelists and also for AJ, and you can reach out to me at info@racetalkrevolution.com. We are happy to lend our platform for anyone who is doing any social justice work of any kind. So
can I say one
thank
more
you.
thing?
Of
Sorry.
course you may.
For y'all don't know, Black Westchester is a Black media site, website, and newspaper. Any of y'all that are writers who want to get something out to the community and feel you want to write something, please, this is a community newspaper, blackwestchester@gmail.com. Please feel free to submit anything and I will run it both on the website and in the newspaper, which is never supposed to be all in my voice. It was supposed to be the community's voice. So I'm opening the door to all of you if you want to write something.
All right, that's a big deal. That's a great opportunity. Absolutely do that. Absolutely do that. So thank you so much. Thank you to Inu Builds, Arts 10566, and Rockefeller Brothers partnership. Thank you so much, AJ Woodson, Jillian McRae, Ridvan Idara, and Cornell Lord Judah Carelock. Please do look up our panelists. There is a wealth of knowledge and talent out here, and we are so grateful to you. Everyone, Happy New Year. Be safe. We love you. And please come back on February 9th for our last conversation with these beautiful people. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.